welcome to today's podcast. I am joined by Mark Fletcher. How are you?
I'm good, Jem.
Good. Now, Mark, you have been a management consultant for 17 years and in the business industry for more than 25 years.
That's right.
Welcome to today. So we're going to talk about consultancy in general and how it can benefit the younger generation coming through. Now, one of the benefits of being a consultant, I guess, is that there's no need for you to necessarily job hop, because actually you get the experience of working in different sectors in various organisations and industries.
That's right. And I mean, that's what drove me to consultancy in the first instance. So I was, prior to coming into consultancy back, before 2007, I worked for 12 years in another organisation. And in that time, I was fortunate that I had a good introduction to what life would be like as a consultant, because like many other organisations, in 2001, with the fall of the trade towers and also the .com, that organisation went through some challenges, some financial challenges. And the leadership of the organisation were proactive enough to take steps. So they started to mobilise a global change, and I saw this come in, and I felt there was a good opportunity to learn something new and get onto the bandwagon that is business change. So that's what I did. And what that did is that set me up within the organisation, so internally, to be able to move around and to be able to see different parts, to be able to see different challenges that the organisation was facing, and be able to experience delivering change outside of my immediate sphere of influence. We're here, and even in the UK. So that set me up to understand more about how to influence people, how to deal with conflict, and how to deal with people, resistance to change. And what it also did as well is it whet my appetite and made me realise that actually my real interest and desires were in delivering change and having that role to deliver a continuous improvement, and being in a position where every day is different to the previous. So when I'd essentially run the course within that organisation and got myself to a point where I felt I'd done everything I possibly could within the walls of that business, I thought, where do I go next? And that's when I came to the realisation, as you say, that rather than job hopping and essentially picking up different experiences every couple of years of different businesses, actually if I went into the role of a management consultant, I could then move between sectors, move between industries, move between different businesses, whilst still being in a single organisation myself. And that's what it did. It was a great way of accelerating experience.
And you only wanted to be in consultancy for a couple of years, didn't you?
I did, yeah. What really drove me to that was get as much experience as I possibly could within the 2 years, and then essentially take stock of where I'm at, and make a decision as to where I go next. But here I am, 17 years and ticking later, and still enjoying it.
Good. Now, you mentioned consultancy being about change management, and consultancy itself has had a massive change, because you've gone from pre-COVID, you were away on site, on client site 100% of the time, and then when COVID happened, you were then remote 100% of the time. So what did that actually mean for the business?
Yeah, so it was a big change. So for the first decade or more of my consulting career, I was 100% on site. So a typical week would look like on a Sunday, packing my suitcase, ready for a very early start on a Monday morning. Because to be clear, I mean, consultancy, it's a challenging industry to work in. You know, it's and when you are on a contract, not only you're not an inexpensive resource, so let's just say for argument's sake, you're an expensive consultant in the eyes of the customer. So when you show up, you've got to show up bright and breezy. You've got to do a full day's work, and when you're there, you've got to be seen to be adding value. So packing bags or suitcase on a Sunday, and then setting off at very early hours to make sure that even if you're 3 or 4 hours away from site, you're arriving at a sensible time. You're not just showing up in the middle of the day. So you're showing up at sort of 9 o'clock ish, means that you're on the road at 6 or even before 6. So you're 3 or 4 hours into your day when you just get to site. And then you've got to put a good day's work in as well. Because again, you don't want to be seen to be, if you're a driver for change and you're asking people, which you oftentimes do as a change agent, because to be clear, when you're delivering transformation of any type, it's really the people. So the technology, yes, you're changing technologies, yes, you're shifting processes, but it's really about people. So you're looking to win hearts and minds. So if you're asking people, which oftentimes they've got a business as usual role, a BAU role, and you're asking them essentially to step it up so that they continue to deliver their BAU role, but they also support your program, you then can't swan off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because you've got an hour's, 2 hours drive or whatever to your next destination, or even an hour to your hotel. So you've got to be seen to be, if you want to get those people to commit to that extra effort during the time of the program, you've got to be seen to be putting in that effort as well. You've got to lead by example. So the life of a consultant is oftentimes, or it used to be certainly, a lot of travel before the day starts, and then a long day when the day is actually up and running, and then oftentimes there's travel at the back end of it as well. So it wasn't uncommon to do that long day on a Monday, and then to be there Monday to Friday. And because again, even on a Friday, more often than not, we were on site, and that site you had to leave at a sensible time. And then there was 3 or 4 hours on the back end. So you get back, open your suitcase, chuck your washing in the washing machine, Saturday morning, open your laptop, do your admin, get all the expenses and everything out the way, send your receipts off, all this sort of stuff. And then the following day on the Sunday, you're packing your suitcase to start it again. And then in 2020, again, whilst we were on site, there was sort of murmuring that everybody may have to go off site that day, finish on site that day, because of the pandemic, and it just hit. And from that moment onwards, it was remote. It was remote, which is, let's be clear, okay, the pandemic was an awful thing, but the result and the digital shift has been a positive, because prior to that, if you were working remote, the technology wasn't there. We didn't have those collaborative tools where you could be jointly working on these products, these documents or whatever. We didn't have, and people weren't used to. We did have it, but it just wasn't as effective. But certainly people weren't used to using things like Teams or Zoom. So it was more wandering between meeting rooms, finding meeting rooms, and that's ultimately what dictated the day. That's what dictated our sequencing of our meetings and interactions, was the availability of a room, the time it took to actually sometimes move between sites to that meeting location, or even if you were on a site and it was a big site, you could spend 15 minutes walking to and from, and then you get to the meeting room and the meeting room's in use. So to move from that to suddenly being remote, where you can go from meeting to meeting to meeting, and there's no travel involved, suddenly you're 100% efficient in that sense. So you take away all that travel. Do you find though that you
get a bit tired because there's no time to think?
There is that. You're constantly moving between, but in terms of efficiency, no longer are we dictated to essentially by the availability of rooms. We can move between. So efficiency-wise, again, for us adding value to our customers, the efficiency is fantastic, and we're not got that lost time in travel. There's no, obviously, with every mile you put on the road, you increase your risk of something happening, an incident on the road. So again, that's come down. The environmental impacts come down. The cost has come down. So no hotel stays, or less hotel stays. But I think what it's done is it's took away that skeptical view that if you're working from home, you're not working, because in many cases, you're not only working, but you're actually more efficient. It's removed that, and it's allowed us now, fast forward 4 years, to make a decision. Is today, for what I'm doing today, is the right thing to do, remote or on site? There's no substitute sometimes for that connection, that interaction you get when you're face to face. And in some instances, if it's a kickoff and you're wanting to engage with people, or it's a bit of a prickly situation, There's no substitute for being face to face.
Yeah, because you feed off that energy that's in the room.
Yes, yeah. You can look into the whites of the people's eyes. You can gauge things far better. Because when I'm looking at a camera, I'm not looking at the screen as well. So there's just something there at this point with the technology. But you can pick and choose rather than just building in that inefficiency of travel and the meeting rooms just for the sake of it. So now I think with this hybrid, we're in a better place. I don't subscribe to this notion of just mandating and forcing people back into the office unless there's a lack of trust, because I think for many reasons, cost, for many reasons, there's good argument to have a blend.
Yeah, so you think hybrid will stay?
I do, and rightly so as well, for not least of which for environmental reasons, but I think for work-life balance, everything else that goes with it. I think having hours of travel, unnecessary travel, in many cases for people to sit at their desks with headphones on and staring at screens, it just doesn't seem like a good move to me. So the hybrid is the right way forward in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree with you. So consultancy used to be in older generation who had done years of service in an industry, and then they're imparting that wisdom through a consultancy role. In recent years, that's actually changed, and there's a lot more younger consultants. So that gives a different perspective, and it also means that anyone that wants to aspire to be a consultant, they don't necessarily have to work in an industry for years. They can jump straight into it. So how do you feel about that sort of blend?
I think it's great. I think we get career consultants now. So people coming straight out of uni, straight into consultancy. Now, as you say, back in the day, it was almost, consultancy was the tail end of your career. When you're winding it down, you're just wanting to use your experience to be able to solve problems, and you offered that up at the rate. But to have that blend now, where we have career consultants and we have people coming through who are driven and motivated, and they're fresh, and they got fresh eyes. They're looking at things. Having that blend is absolutely great. And I think I draw the analogy, and I know you've heard me say this before, but I draw the analogy with what I heard once from Alex Ferguson in an interview with Gary Neville, for football fans out there. And Gary Neville asked the question, being quite open about it. He said to Fergie, he said, "How is it you managed to blend a team of superstars?" And then he called out the likes of Cantona and Giggs and Ronaldo's and all those sort of 30 years of superstars they had at Old Trafford. How did you manage to blend that team of superstars with players? And Neville said, like himself, and he also called out Steve Bruce. And Fergie gave a great answer, and he said, I had the superstars, but with superstars, they've already been there and they've already got those skills. So if you have a team of superstars, what's driving them to go that step further? Whereas when you've got the likes of Bruce and Neville, and they're looking over the training ground and they're seeing these superstars and they're going, I want to aspire to be like that person. I want to be the next Cantona, or I want to be the next, whatever that superstar is. It pushes them, so they put in an extra half an hour of practicing their free kicks, or an extra couple of miles of running, because they're driving to do that, because they want to get to that level. But the flip side is also that those superstars are looking across the training ground and they're thinking, I'm already there, but I got these young guns over here, and they're putting an extra 2 or 3 miles in. They're putting an extra hour of free kick taking in, or whatever they're practicing. So
yeah, creating that competition, healthy competition.
It. Yeah, they're lifting each other. So they're looking over there and they're thinking, okay, I'm the superstar here, but these guys are improving and they're starting to nip at my heels a little bit here. So then they're having to lift their game. So what you end up with then is the drive and the determination of the new guys coming through, and then that encouraging the people who've already been there to pick their game up, and that you get that sort of that compounding effect, which is great. And that's what we see in consultancy is we have people come through, and you can't replace, and you can't, experience is invaluable. But when you're in consultancy, and by definition, you have to think of yourself as Adam Silipsky, the CEO of AWS, once said, think of yourself as an insurgent, not as an incumbent. So think of yourself every day as though you've come in and you need to have an impact. You need to make a change. You need to drive performance. You need to improve. Don't ever get to that stage where you become part of the furniture and you're incumbent, because then your effectiveness and your impact is starting to drop. That's it then. You can argue then you're better off rolling off and bringing somebody else in with that mindset. And if you're constantly thinking that way, that every day you've got to drive and improve, you need that tenaciousness and that push. So to have that best of breed, that blend, I should say, between the experience and the people who've been there and done it, and they've experienced all these different situations. Combine that with people who are coming in, who are fresh into the industry. They've come into a digital world. They know that digital world. That's all they know. And they've got different perspectives and ways of looking at things, plus that energy and that drive and that ambition. And you put those two things together, and you've got a great combination there.
Yeah, I think that's really important, isn't it? And also that would impact the client, because they can feed off some more than others. So having that blend means that you get the best of everything.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's to drive transformations about people. So if you've got that energy and that pace, and that couple that with the experience, if you've got that, people want to be part of it. Success has 1,000 fathers, as they say. I won't say what failure is, but yeah. So it's that energy and that drive and pace is vital.
Yeah. So cost of living at the moment is, as we know, at an all-time high. And in terms of consultancy, you said it yourself, your day rate is not to be sniffed at. Do you think that there will be an impact on particularly smaller businesses, thinking that bringing in a consultancy firm is almost like a non-essential, and they're going to be trying to make savings wherever they can? How do you think that's going to impact the industry?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is that I say about the day rate, I think it's healthy for consultants. I think it's healthy for permanent employees to think this way. That whatever you're being paid isn't insignificant. And therefore, you've got to be able to demonstrate value. If you go into every day at work, whether you work for, the NHS, or you work for any business, BP, or wherever you are, and you go in there and you think my wage could be spent on somebody else, so what am I doing to actually add value? Then it might change your mindset in terms of what you do. But specifically, going back to your question around the cost of living, I think the way to look at it is one of the things that also attracted me to consultancy, as well as being able to accelerate my experience by being able to hop across the sectors, was also that consultancy is pan sector, it's pan industry, and so you're able to then, when there's a particular demand in one industry, you're able to move into that, and if there's a lull in another one, you can balance it out. Yeah, but we need to think about the cost of living. What's driving that cost of living? So if you think of the cost of living as being driven by inflation, which is being driven by geopolitical issues, and then there's the geopolitical issues then influencing the mindset around things like, is globalization the right thing? Because you've got obviously the Houthis delaying the shipments coming through the Red Sea, so suddenly supply chain is an issue. We obviously had a massive issue with supply chain during the pandemic, which again makes people think, is globalization the right thing? And I'm not saying it's the right or the wrong thing, incidentally, but there's now a shift for deglobalization, or at least to rethink the supply chain to take into account these types of things happening. So, because consultancy ultimately is, we will help you with your business problem. We will help to resolve your business challenges. We will help you to achieve your objectives.
Yeah, you're creating efficiency.
Or if there's a regulatory need, or if the world has just simply changed and things need to be done in a different way. But if we pick up on the cost of living, influence of of deglobalization, and then deglobalization would be then the repatriation of, let's just take manufacturing for example, so bringing the manufacturing back on shores here in the UK, but we can't bring the manufacturing back on shore, repatriate it in its current guise as it's done in China, for instance, because the labour costs over there are so low. If you brought it back over here with our labour costs, the cost of that product would increase probably multiples, and that would then negatively contribute towards cost of living. So anything that's being repatriated needs to be repatriated differently. It needs to be repatriated in a smart way. So that means business change. So there's a need then for a business and a management consultancy in this instance to be able to come in and support with that, repatriating those processes back here into the UK, but not in their current guise, in this new guise, where taking advantage of things like AI, like robotics, like any number of technologies that would then mean that it's back on shores, but it's back on shores in a far more efficient, cost-effective way, which means you get the benefit of being here, it's deglobalized, but you don't get the ill effect of the increased cost of labour. So I think ultimately we do need to be sensitive to it. There's always cost pressures in the industry, of course there is, but it's about value. And if the value in the eyes of the industry is deglobalization and to bring it back on shores in a cost-effective way for an enduring period, for the next X amount of decades potentially, then that's what we're here to do. So I see actually a lot of these challenges around the world, and because of the sort of the instability and the changes that will create, it will actually feed the need for change, and therefore it'll feed the consulting industry.
So it's going to be booming.
Potentially so.
So in terms of young consultants then, what does it take to be a consultant? Anyone that's looking at this industry, what advice would you give them?
The first thing to say is before you actually go into the industry, is have a look in the mirror. So if you are someone who is happy to go into work and do an honest day's work, know the people sat around you, you're comfortable with the environment because you've known those people, you've known that environment, and you just want to get your head down, get a good day's work and get out. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, because the world's a lot of different people in this world, and thankfully so.
Yeah.
And we need different people. Then consultancy may not be the right thing for you. If you are someone who is driven by, I want tomorrow to be better than today, I am comfortable dancing in the grey space, it doesn't need to be black and white, I'm comfortable in the uncertainty, I'm comfortable being here today and somewhere else tomorrow, and working with this person today and someone else tomorrow. If you're comfortable with all of that and you want to drive change, and you're happy that Monday you might be on a high, Tuesday on a low, and Wednesday you might be back up there, but you've got to be able to be robust and be positive, then consultancy could well be the answer for you. So that's the first thing, is really, really consider it. Otherwise you set yourself up for a negative experience if it's not for you. But if it is for you, it's a great experience. Once you're in consultancy, the first tip that I would give, and always do, is be curious. So fortunately with consultancy, because you're working across industries and because you're working across sectors, and also you will likely be working in teams where it's multidisciplinary. So you'll get people who are deeply technical, you might get people who are very people focused, you might get people who are very much focused on the organisation, the structure of the organisation. There's various different disciplines, some really deep in one particular technology. What that gives you is the opportunity, and again, you can go across industries and sectors as well as those. What that gives you is a whole plethora of different permutations. You could work in that industry, that sector, that industry, you could work in that discipline on that particular project, and you may find yourself, through curiosity, stumbling across something that you actually go, that really worked for me. I actually really enjoyed that. That ticked all the boxes. I never thought it would, because you'd only know what you know. But being curious, you could come across something that really worked for you. And then you could find yourself then, once you've gone across and you've experienced, you could then make a really informed decision about where you really want to go deep on your T-shape. So be curious, number one. Um, the second tip I would give within consultancy is, and I mentioned this before about resilience. You've got to be resilient, and I draw the sort of I use the example of the Ready Break cereal box, and that sort of silhouette almost of the glow, almost like in Cocoon, the film, 1980s film Cocoon, where you have that glow. You've got to be that person with the glow around you, because again, you're in an environment where you're being paid to deliver change, and you've got to get people on board. And the way to get people on board is positivity and energy and drive. And even if you have a bad Monday, you've got to wake up on a Tuesday morning with a spring in your step, and you've got to put a smile on your face, and you've got to be ready to say, guys, I'm ready. I want you guys to be ready. Let's push on. Let's make this happen. Yeah, you cannot sulk and be dropped. So your energy drops, the whole team drops. So tip number 2 is resilience, and that sort of be that ready break man. And the third and final one is your brand. So not necessarily from day one, because I think it's unreasonable, because you're finding your feet and you find out who you are, but start to think about your brand, because in consultancy, a lot of it's word of mouth. So even after 17 years, what is most prominent in people's minds is your last engagement. So you can do wonderful stuff for years and years. You have one bad engagement, and that's what's prominent. And that's the sad truth of it. Okay, so that's not strictly true. It's not entirely true. It's not quite as black and white as that. Because of course, if you've been outstanding for years and you suddenly had one, there's probably good reason.
It matters to the client more so, though.
It does, yeah. Because it matters to the client, and it also matters to the people who are putting you in front of the client, who own that relationship with the client.
Yeah.
Because they want to minimize the risk. They want to be confident that what they're going to do, what they're going to give their client is going to be a success.
Yeah.
So the first thing they're going to ask you is, where were you last? How did that work out? Can somebody give me, they're going to probably ring up their colleague and say, how did that work out? So you've got to recognize that, and it could be a healthy thing to think this way, that you're only as good as your last engagement. So don't take anything for granted, and start building up that brand. What do you want to be known for? What are the 3 things that when people hear your name, you want them to go, this person is A, B, C, and that could be a safe pair of hands. That could be like deeply technical. That could be extremely analytical, great problem solver, great with people. It could be anything, any of those things, results driven. But what are those things that you want people to think when they hear your name? And then, because that's what will get you the next gig and the one after that as well, is that word of mouth.
Yeah. What's the brand of Mark Fletcher?
That's a difficult question, but I think what I would like to think is a relentless drive for improvement. So always scanning to understand, even if the programs are going great, even if what we're doing is getting good plaudits, it's like, what can we do? What can we do next? What can we do just to sharpen it that little bit more? And because it's that expectation curve, that if you've raised the bar, and if that is the case, you raise the bar, that bar is now the expectation. So now, if you want to go over and above, and you want to be seen to be achieving, you've got to go over and above, and you've got to lift it again. You've got to continuously lift that bar. So that constant and that relentless scanning for ways of pushing the performance is probably the one thing I'd like to think.
And you're like that personally and professionally. You always think, can I lift a slightly heavier weight? Can I, do a slightly better job on that? You are quite the perfectionist, I think.
I think in consultancy, and you see this with the junior consultants, and so I'm really passionate about encouraging the junior consultants and mentoring, using that sort of force multiplier type of thought process, that we're here at this point in your career, whether you're mid-career or even later in your career, whatever point you think I'm at, if you've got experiences that you can impart and you can give others and you can coach others and allow them to be better at what they do, and then they in turn do the same thing, it has that sort of almost exponential effect. But I can see it really early on that you get very, very bright people. And so we talk about aptitude and attitude. And you get, more often than not, you get the bright people who can pick things up, who can learn, who can actually impress in terms of their core intelligence. But what really distinguishes one from another, in particular somebody who is going to be a high performer for a sustained period, is their attitude. Is it in their DNA that even without anybody pushing them in the back and saying, pick it up, they look at themselves and they go, oh, I can do that better. I'll do another cut of that, because I know that even though that one was probably more than good enough, I know I've got it in me to do something better, and offer up options that in some instances, or suggestions in some instances, may be a little bit uncomfortable for them, and may even make their life a little bit more difficult, but they know it's in the greater good of the program. And you can pick that up. And those ones that have that core intelligence, which most do, that come into the industry, tend to find that most people are of that level, but they also have that attitude to really, and it's in their DNA to really push themselves. They're the ones who, certainly from my experience, they're the ones that you can see that just go on and on and on, and they continue to just step it up.
Wonderful. Thank you. We've run out of time for today. So thank you so much for joining me.